There is so much being said online in the dozens of Facebook groups and the tens of thousands of followers of these Facebook groups, these members. Everyone is tearing each piece of interaction between this couple apart.
I just have to wonder if she even wanted Bela and Cece.
Her parent-raising ideas were disturbing.
The one that I would label the narcissist is Shanann.
I think she drove him to lose his shit.
Oh my God, she did not drive him to
She did.
lose his
She
shit.
did.
You don't know what went on.
She did, Laura. She
behind
did.
those
She
doors.
drove him insane.
Come on, why are you victim blaming?
She was a bitch.
Shanann Watts and her 3 babies were murdered by Chris Watts, Shanann's husband, 5 years ago. And to this day, the internet is going out of its way to vilify her. There are channels that still take the time 5 years later to pick through her extensive social media history and paint every word she says, every gesture she makes, and everything they see her do, and make the worst assumptions about all of it. There's no consideration given to the innocent explanation for that word or gesture or thing she just did. Every single thing she did as a wife, a mother, and a human being are used to vilify her. We know that the internet will do this to anyone who voices an opinion. If you make your voice heard and people don't like your opinion, the internet will make sure you know about it and how horrible you are, sometimes with graphic threats and horrible lies. When you or I experience that response, we are among the living, and we have the ability to respond and defend ourselves. Shanann Watts is not among the living because she was murdered. She does not have the ability to come online and respond to the vile accusations about her because she was murdered by her husband. Chris Watts has confessed to the murders of Shanann and their children and is serving several life sentences, and yet there's an overwhelming number of videos that go at her day after day.
That our family, including Shanann and her children and our grandchildren, have been ridiculed, demeaned, slandered, mocked in the most vicious ways you can imagine.
In all honesty, I've not seen another murder victim more slandered and abused by the internet, and that's why I'm making this video. In my opinion, there is nothing more cowardly than making hate content about a murder victim. There is nothing more greedy than using a murder victim's social media content to vilify her. But the content thrives here. It gets a lot of play. Why? How did we get here? This murder happened 5 years ago. Why is the vilification of Shanann Watts still a running commentary on the internet? I'm going to show you how this happens, but to put it bluntly, it happens when you take a lying, adulterous, toxic, murderous man from a toxic, victim-blaming family who can't accept that their sweet, quiet, golden-haired child could possibly murder his children, and have taken all of that to the toxic internet to engage with toxic YouTubers who continue to make up ridiculous theories that seek to exonerate a family annihilator. It started with a lie from a liar. Before he finally pled guilty to all of the murders, Chris Watts tried to claim that he killed Shanann because he caught her killing their daughters.
Did she kill him? They're blue. Those are my babies. Those are my kids. What happened?
Kill her. How did he say he did it when he snapped?
He said he did the same thing that she did to him, that she did to the girls.
The story is preposterous and easily debunked, but this initial confession has been used as the basis for countless hours of YouTube videos trying to prove that Chris's first confession was the true confession. ignoring the fact that he's done several more conflicting confessions since that time. The next seed was planted by Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts. They were interviewed shortly after Chris pled guilty to all the crimes. They were still in extreme shock and in complete disbelief that he could kill his children. So when they talked about Shanann in these interviews, they vilified her.
She always said a lot of things about Chris in front of me that I didn't like. Like, this isn't the kind of person I would date. He doesn't know how to do this, or he doesn't know how to do that. He looks like a skater boy. Look at his hair. Look how much stuff he puts on his hair. It was just on and on and on, and I just got a bad feeling.
And pregnancy, and what did Chris tell you about that? Was he excited?
No, I don't think he was. I think it was a shock.
What it might do to your guys' relationship, and speaking out like this about a woman who can't defend herself right now.
Well, Shanann, I mean, you have to get to know her to be around her. Put it that way.
Throughout the 5 years since Ronnie and Cindy gave these interviews, they've gone back and forth from saying they loved Shanann very much and shouldn't have said those things to continuing to blame Shanann for provoking Chris into an adulterous affair and murder. Ronnie Watts is a moderator and an active participant on a YouTube channel that hasn't stopped posing ridiculous conspiracy theories about these murders since they happened. This channel still goes live with Ronnie Watts in the chat, talking about all the possible ways they can take some sort of guilt away from Chris Watts. But this isn't the first or only YouTube channel to serve as a known proxy for Ronnie and Cindy Watts. The first channel to emerge as a direct proxy to the Watts family was Revelation in the Reckoning.
Kim Kaufman, she has been an advocate for you. She says, I love you, support. Kim Kaufman, she has been an advocate for you. She says, I love you, support you.
The Watts case was already heavily trending all over social media, but this was the first channel to have the Holy Grail, to have a direct connection to Chris Watts, to be talking to him in prison. They were the first channel to come out as a known proxy for the Watts family. This channel became the centerpiece for a very concerted effort driven by Chris's parents to gather evidence and support for a very costly, challenging, and time-consuming effort to challenge Chris's verdict and sentence and reduce his prison sentence. By the time this channel emerged, Chris had pled guilty and was sentenced, and the Colorado DA's office had released a 1,900-page PDF with all of the discovery they had gathered to date. Important phrase, to date, before Chris decided to plead guilty to all the murders. People had already scraped Shanann's entire social media library for their content to use to criticize and exploit it for their videos. This new release of official court data gave the internet a beefy new source of content. Some channels looked at the discovery for what it was, an incomplete, heavily redacted, not full version of the events leading up to the murders. Other channels use what is clinically termed as confirmation bias to confirm their already formed conspiracy theories or to make up entirely new conspiracy theories, all meant to help Chris Watts and vilify Shanann. Revelation in the Reckoning had also taped prison conversations between Kim Kaufman, the channel owner, and Chris Watts. The channel shot up to 10,000 subscribers really quickly and did daily, multi-hour, sometimes 12-hour live streams discussing in detailed graphic terms how it was impossible for Chris to have killed his own children. They even did a recreation of the scene, even though he had confessed and was already serving those life sentences. The success of Revelation in the Reckoning, as well as other channels that had touted a direct relationship with the Watts family, inspired more channels to emerge as the savior to Chris Watts and the Watts family. The most infamous channel to pop up at this time was Truth and Transparency. You might know Truth and Transparency now is the channel that creates conspiracy theories about the murdered college students in Idaho. The channel name in itself, Truth and Transparency, was a play on the factions that had developed in the true crime community.
I just want the truth.
The faction that defended Chris Watts, a known liar, and vilified Shanann, his murder victim, ironically called themselves truthers. Even before Lana Oriani started her Truth and Transparency channel, she had a terrible reputation on YouTube. She mocked YouTubers as lazy, no-job-having sloths. She was crass and hypersexual, and she launched a very sketchy nonprofit called Fight for a Family for the express purpose of helping the Watts exonerate Chris Watts. Around the same time that she launched Fight for a Family, numerous videos surfaced of the same person who just launched this nonprofit mocking Shanann Watts as a character called Shazam. In multiple videos she posted in Facebook groups, Lana used Snapchat's corpse filter to recreate Shanann's Facebook videos. She mocks Shanann's MLM participation, her motherhood, her cooking, and her wifelyhood. Practically every single video is riddled with sexual overtones.
I just got off the TSA, and they said, do you have any explosives? And I said, just this bomb-ass pussy.
I thrive through every pregnancy. I drink through it.
I do treat Chris kind of like shit sometimes, but I make up for it, and he knows that I love him. I'm totally laying on my back, wishing that Chris would come by. I think I'm just going to be wishful thinking this for a minute. He's probably not too happy about my live last night, but it did take away from our special time together.
By the time Truth and Transparency did her first live stream on YouTube, she'd had a massive behind-the-scenes blow-up with Kim Kaufman from Revelation and the Reckoning that resulted in her severing her direct ties with the Watts family. In her first YouTube stream, she said she was here to clear her name from all of the terrible things that had come out about her. And even though she announced she was no longer working with the Watts, she took all the information and discoveries she had gathered and made hours and hours and hours of videos in defense of Chris Watts. Of course, much of that defense involved vilifying the living memory of Shanann Watts. Take all the worst things you can think about a person, put it into a blender with a bunch of sexual bullshit, and pile that upon Shanann day after day, hour after hour on the Truth and Transparency channel. And you get a picture of what was transpiring. Shanann was claimed as a terrible mother, an abusive wife. She mismanaged her finances. She drove him to have an affair. And it didn't stop there. Truth and Transparency accused Shanann of having sex with another Chris and said that the baby Shanann was carrying was not Chris Watts's. There was a time when some of the content on these anti-Shanann channels were working with the Watts to call for DNA tests for the baby to ensure that it was really Chris Watts's baby. She accused Shanann of getting drunk while pregnant, even though this same person who's accusing her of getting drunk while pregnant was on camera on a live stream on her own channel drinking while driving. And she also said that Shanann was clearly inebriated when she arrived home at 1:48 in the morning and walked into her own murder. Truth and Transparency was not the only channel doing this. Big and small channels took their various turns vilifying Shanann, but she pretended to have insider knowledge.
Okay, here we go. Ready? This is my conversation with the one and only Cindy Watts.
And she also had this kind of superficial charm that attracted people to her. So she projected this false authority and superiority. Coming from a perceived insider, these rumors and false accusations caused more channels to pick up those narratives and spread them further. Now, hundreds, if not thousands of seeds were planted. In fact, the entire true crime crop was seeded with false rumors and conspiracies that disgraced Shanann's name. If you've been around the true crime scene for a while, you know that when new information about a hot case stops coming out and the murderer is in prison, content creators have two choices. Keep making content about that case or move on to a new case. Many channels eventually stopped making content about Watts. Other channels continued to talk about the case factually. And other channels made the choice to create new bombshell conspiracy theories. Nothing will keep a viewer glued to the screen like a good conspiracy theory. So over the course of 5 years, the algorithm has given more love to conspiracy channels that implicate Shanann in many of their conspiracies. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of content defending Shanann Watts as well. And her family's also engaged with proxy YouTube channels to defend Shanann and themselves. But since the algorithm favors and promotes misinformation and conspiracy further than factual content, you have to specifically search for pro-Shanann content in the 5-year history of the Watts case. As recently as 2 months ago, one of the most prolific Shanann Watts hate channels took the time to spew absolutely palpable hate for that murder victim. One channel has risen to over 10,000 subscribers strictly on the backs of Shanann and her babies, and the people who first planted the seeds of derision on her are active participants in the chat. Ask yourself, would any of this be happening if there was no financial incentive whatsoever to do this? The short answer is probably not. There are many murder victims with far sketchier histories and behaviors than Shanann Watts, and you don't see them being torn apart every day and blamed for their own murders 5 years after they happened. The fact is that people make money doing this. YouTube makes money doing this. And while those financial incentives and heavy algorithmic promotion still exist, so will channels that use Shanann's name to make more money. But let's go back to how this all started. The monstrous cruelty of the murders all by themselves is enough to drive any empathetic human being into tears. Even some law enforcement, which is more immune to the carnage of a crime scene, was so affected by the Watts case that they retired early because of the Watts case.
For those who haven't heard about that case before, don't spend a lot of time looking at it because it ruins your conscience.
Yeah.
But it was one that changed who I was as a prosecutor. I think changed this community. It certainly changed law enforcement. We lost an incredible detective from law enforcement because that was the straw that broke his back. He had to retire from law enforcement because of that case, plus some others that he had worked on.
Personally, I can't even start looking at a video about the Watts murders without wanting to break into tears. That's why it takes me longer to produce Watts-related videos than other videos. But here we are, 5 years later, and that heinous murder has been matched by heinous internet cruelty. I can't look at a Watts video without feeling intense shame and humiliation about how the internet has taken the coward's approach to vilifying a voiceless murder victim who will never be able to fight back. It quite literally makes me nauseous to think of the hundreds and hundreds of hours that Shanann has had no voice or opportunity to defend.
I can tell you before we even start that Shanann has way too much makeup on here and not enough here. And it's not her fault she doesn't have lips, but she's almost got the whore eyes going and then forgot about the lips. She has the innocent lips.
Shanann was not a perfect angel, but the people who vilify her aren't either. And the fact that the internet makes it possible for these vilifiers to earn an income slandering her name is one of my primary causes for being here. What values have these channels added to the story? These channels say they just want answers. It's been 5 years. Have they helped us get any answers? Spoiler alert, no, and they never will. Continuing to profit off the vilification of a voiceless murder victim is the height of cowardice, in my opinion, and it's very sad that Chris's parents, with the help of some YouTube channels and a toxic, hate-loving algorithm, are so committed to pushing that agenda. Chris Watts may have murdered Shanann Watts 5 years ago, but Chris, along with his family, their proxy of YouTube channels, and the hateful algorithm, have murdered Shanann's memory every day since. Peace out.